We'll now move to question time, and I call Senator Kovacic.
My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Minister, what is the total number of company insolvencies since you came to government in 2022? And can you confirm whether this number has grown or shrunk over this period?
Thank you, Senator Kovacic. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President. I thank Senator for the question. I don't have the numbers that the Senator has asked for before me. There were some reports from COSBOA this morning in the media, and we understand that many businesses are under the pump because of the result of higher interest rates and some of the challenges that we talk about in this chamber from time to time in relation to our economy. And that's why the government has looked to find measures to support small business, including the energy bill relief. And I note from the media reports that one of the most pressing challenges for business was energy costs, which is why we targeted that measure, giving every small business $325 from memory to assist with some of those increasing costs. We're also responding to representations from COSBOA around investing in cyber preparedness and cyber security, as that has been identified by small business as another area of pressure for them, and cyber security, cyber resilience. Senator Ruston, Senator Ruston, thank you. And I am talking to you about the ways the government is looking to support small business through some of the challenges that they have raised with us. And they have raised energy, and we've responded to energy. They have raised cyber. We are responding to cyber. On instant asset write-off, the $20,000 for instant asset write-off for small businesses, and that relief is helping. So we are focused on ensuring that we can support small business where we can. Insolvencies, unfortunately—
The time for answering has expired. Senator Kovacic, first supplementary.
Minister, ASIC statistics have revealed company insolvencies hit 11,053 in 23-24, with overall insolvencies since Labor was elected skyrocketing to 22,800 businesses. ASIC analysis shows these figures represent the worst average number of insolvencies per quarter under any government since records began in 1999. Minister, how is sticky inflation and record-high interest rates contributing to record insolvencies?
The question has expired. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, I responded to this in my first question, acknowledging that inflation in the economy has been a challenge for small business. I accept that. I don't think anybody who follows the economy wouldn't have a view about that. But when we look at the rate of insolvencies, and I'm not saying this to dispute the fact that we acknowledge businesses are feeling the pressure of the current economic circumstances, but insolvencies have averaged 0.24% under the Albanese government, the lowest on record for any government, lower than they were under Prime Minister Howard, lower than they were under Prime Ministers Abbott, Turnbull and Morrison. And so we will continue to look at ways to provide support for small business where the budget can find room for it and respond to the priority areas that they have raised with us.
When you've quite finished, Senator Hughes. Senator Kovacic. Second supplementary.
A small business perspective report launched today states that operating conditions are arguably the most challenging in living memory, and 57% of small business owners reported high stress due to financial strain, with 1 in 3 not paying themselves due to cash flow issues and 25% using personal savings to keep afloat. Minister, why should Australia's small businesses have to pay the price for the Albanese Labor government's poor economic management.
Thank you, Senator Kovacic. And before I call the minister, I'm going to remind all senators that I expect senators to listen in respectful silence. Minister.
Thank you. Well, my response to that question is that we are doing what we can to support small business and to drive down inflation in this economy. And the people that are seeking to block that and stop that are those opposite. So it's a bit rich to come in here and go, what are you doing, what are you doing, when every vote you have in this chamber is to oppose a measure the government is putting in place to support people through a period of higher inflation. And so you can sit there and raise questions, but the real measure is how you vote. And when you vote in this place, you vote against energy bill relief. You vote against the cost of living measures that we have put in place. That is the reality, and your voting record shows it. So while we get on this side, responding to challenges, engaging with COSBOA, looking at ways that we can support small business as the engine room of our economy, we will continue to do that, including in renewable energy space, which is a real opportunity for small business in this country.
Senator Green.
Thanks, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. The Albanese Labor government wants Australia to be a country that makes things here. We want Australia to be a country that produces renewable power in abundance, bringing down domestic power prices and exporting excess energy to the world. We want to make the most of our natural resources, value-adding here and strengthening our economic security. And we want our people skilled up to reap the benefits of this economic transformation. Minister, how will the government's future Made in Australia policy set up the Australian economy for the future?
Thank you, Senator Green. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. And I thank Senator Green for the question and for the interest and energy that she puts into the future Made in Australia agenda. And I heard while Senator Green was asking her question the snipes from the no-alition, which is the combination of the opposition and your friends the Greens. Your friends the Greens. Sitting there griping away, because I think most people outside of this chamber would think, on what grounds could anybody in any parliament vote against a future Made in Australia? We know, as Senator Watt said yesterday, that those opposite vote against a future. They would like to go back to the past. We know that. They don't like the future. They're scared of the future. But a future made in Australia, about jobs, about opportunity, about seizing our natural strengths, about increasing manufacturing opportunities and our sovereign capability after the COVID-19 pandemic, who on earth could really stand and vote against a bill like that? But here we have it. Here is the Senate for you, all to witness. We have those opposite voting again, voting against housing, voting against future Made in Australia, voting against the renewable energy transition, any major piece of economic transformation in this country. The opposition is opposed to it. And if they could find their little alliance with the Greens and strengthen that, we know it makes Senator Dunion uncomfortable. We know it does, Senator Dunion. We know it's like forests and, I know, Tasmania. We don't really like to be in bed with the Greens, but here we go. Come to Canberra and all we see is those opposite, the no-alition working together to block a future Made in Australia.
Time for answering has expired. Order. Senator Green, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, today we learnt that almost 80% more women are training as apprentices in male-dominated trades. What opportunities exist for women in the Albanese Labor government's future Made in Australia agenda? And why is the government so focused on increasing economic opportunities for women?
Thank you, Senator Green. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Green for that, and again for advocating for the economic opportunities for women in this country. We know that the economic opportunities for this country going forward, the jobs, the technology, all of that relies on utilising all of our labour capacity, and that involves 50% women. We don't want to see women locked out of opportunities or having to retrofit a gender-segregated workforce after it happens. So we have been putting investment behind programs like the Building Women's Career Program to support more women to take and train in jobs in male-dominated industries. We have one of the highest, I can hear a groan over there, but we have one of the highest gender-segregated workforces in the developed world. And we don't think, on this side of the chamber, that women should lose out on any of the economic opportunities or the job opportunities going forward.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Green, second supplementary.
Well, thanks, President. Minister, a key focus of the Albanese Labor government's Future Made in Australia agenda is the energy transformation. How do Future Made in Australia initiatives support the energy transformation? And what challenges has the government faced in responding to the energy transformation and in providing cheap, clean electricity to Australians?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I thank Senator Green for that question because it is an important one. A key component of the Future Made in Australia agenda is about ensuring that we get the energy transformation right. So things like our production tax credits, things like making our supply chain more resilient, and particularly through solar, through our innovation fund and through making sure that we map the opportunities, the geological opportunities, the potential of the entire country. This is just part of our Future Made in Australia agenda. We've got our Rewiring the Nation plan. We've also got providing, obviously, the private sector with the certainty they needed after, what was it again, 10 years and 22 failed energy policies. And I think we're shaping up for a 23rd. This one from opposition. I think we're going to see the 23rd failed energy policy, which is, of course, Mr Dutton's risky nuclear energy plan, a plan that hasn't been costed, has no detail, and even if they do it, will only do 4% of our energy.
Senator Chandler.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Home Affairs, Senator Watt. A report in the Daily Telegraph today revealed a Palestinian man, Mr Fayez El-Hassani, was granted a visa to Australia, despite once hosting political members of terrorist organisations Hamas and the Politburo of Palestinian Islamic Jihad at his Gaza Art Institute. Minister, can you confirm whether Mr El-Hassani was cleared by ASIO prior to his visa being granted?
Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Senator Chandler. Of course, these matters have been canvassed quite extensively this morning at question time in the House of Representatives. But I'm very well. There were answers given. They might not just be the answers that you are hoping for, but there were answers, accurate answers that were provided. I went to the trouble of getting a transcript of Minister Burke's answers. I'm surprised that you didn't bother to do the same yourself. But I'm very happy to repeat the comments that Minister Burke made. And they were that we are working closely with our security agencies on this matter, as people would expect. Everyone from Gaza granted a visa since October the 7th has been checked by our security agencies. That is the answer to the question. Every single person has been checked by our security agencies. I think the disturbing thing that we continue to see from the opposition is a complete lack of faith in our security agencies. We have seen that over and over again. And I think it's very concerning to see this creeping authoritarianism within the opposition. Last week we had the Leader of the Opposition, Mr Dutton, and other frontbenchers demanding that state police go and arrest certain people. This week we've got the opposition trying to direct the security agencies as to what they would do. So that's a little shadow and a little insight into the kind of operation we would have under a Dutton government if, God forbid, we ever had a Dutton government. Because what we know about Mr Dutton is that he has no limits. There are no limits to the authoritarian action that he will take, and you will not get a member of the Albanese government directing the security agencies in the way that Mr Dutton seeks to do and Senator Patterson seems to do, and you won't get members of the Albanese government directing state police to go and arrest people because there's this quaint old nation called the separation of powers. I know it's something the Queensland National Party never was able to understand, but it seems the Liberal Party doesn't understand it either.
Thank you. Senator McKenzie, lower your voice. Senator Chandler, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. The reporting also revealed Mr El-Hassani had opened this meeting by stressing the need to support Palestinian resistance and confront the occupation by all possible means to restore rights and liberate the land. The Director-General of ASIO has previously said regarding visa security assessments, a tweet that says the 7th of October was acceptable, that's going to be a problem for that person. Minister, how is it that someone who has made these statements passed security checks and the character test for an Australian visa?
Thank you, Senator Chandler. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President. Well, again, we see a direct attack on the independent security agencies from the federal opposition, an absolutely extraordinary situation that we continue to see.
Please resume your seat. Senator Henderson, lower your voice. Minister, please continue.
Now, I know the opposition don't want to see themselves characterised.
Please resume your seat. Senator Hughes, equally, lower your voice. Senator Hughes, I'll call you to order. Minister, please continue.
Thanks, President. I'll take the interjection from Senator Hughes. Senator Hughes just said, as a member of the opposition, if you're just going to leave it to bureaucrats, then why are you here? So that's the policy of the federal opposition, is that ministers in a Dutton government would direct the national security agencies to make decisions rather than relying on the independent advice from national security professionals.
Senator Chandler. Or after. Senator Chandler.
Thank you, President. Point of order. The minister is going nowhere near answering the question. It's a point of order of direct relevance.
I didn't ask the question. Order. Order. As you know, Senator Chandler, the minister. Order. I am responding to the point of order. The minister is entitled to. Senator Hughes, when you've quite finished. Order. Order. Senator Hughes, if you can't remain quiet, please leave the chamber. That's your choice. Senator Chandler, as you are aware, the minister is entitled to respond to interjections, so you could get your question more directly answered if you invited your colleagues not to make interjections. Minister Watt, I would also remind you to direct your comments to the chair.
Thanks, President. Well, as I say, what we see continually from the federal opposition is direct attacks on the independence of our national security agencies. The Albanese government is more than willing to rely on the advice from national security professionals as to the security credentials of any applicant for a visa. Our security agencies don't stop checking someone's national security credentials the moment they enter into Australia, and as further information comes to light, then advice is updated and we act on that advice. The only people who want to ignore our national security agencies are those sitting opposite.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Chandler, second supplementary. Senator Chandler, please resume your seat. Senator Chandler, please resume your seat. Order. Senator Chandler was on her feet, waiting. Senator McKenzie, it's about the fourth time I've called you this question time. I invite you to listen in silence or leave the chamber. It's your choice. Your colleague has been on her feet trying to ask the next question. Senator Chandler, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Can the minister guarantee that the Albanese Labor government has not granted a single visa to any individual with links to a terrorist organisation?
Thank you, Senator Chandler. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Senator Chandler. Well, the benefit of Senate question time happening after the House of Reps question time is that you can refer back to the answers that House ministers provided to exactly the same questions that were asked 4 hours and about 19 minutes ago. Now, Minister Burke was asked this question, and the guarantee that I can provide is exactly the same guarantee that Mr Dutton could have provided when he was the Home Affairs Minister and allowed for hundreds of people to enter Australia on visitor visas from war zones such as Afghanistan. When Mr Dutton was the Minister for Home Affairs, he granted 991 visitor visas from Afghanistan while it was in a war zone, so I guess I can provide the same guarantee that Mr Dutton could provide there. When Mr Dutton was the Home Affairs Minister, 4,994 visitor visas were granted to people from Iraq while it was a war zone, so I'll give you the same guarantee as Mr Dutton could do then. And 1,505 visitor visas were granted from Syria while Mr Dutton was the Minister as well. So we're happy to provide the same guarantee as Mr Dutton.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering answering has expired. Senator Hughes, I've called you a number of times during question time. I asked you to listen in silence or leave the chamber. It is your choice. I draw to the attention of honourable senators the presence in the chamber of a delegation from the Parliament of New South Wales, led by the Honourable Ben Franklin, MLC, President of the Legislative Council and my friend and colleague on the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. On behalf of all senators, I wish you a warm welcome to the Senate, and with the concurrence of honourable senators, I invite the President to take a seat on the floor of the Senate. I did suggest to the clerk we could have guest presenters, but he didn't really oblige. Yes, that's right, Senator Duniam. Senator Hanson-Young.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Environment, Senator McAllister. Today, the Minister for Environment is hosting her Nature Positive Summit in Sydney. Yet in the last month alone, the Minister has approved 3 coal mines, greenlit the destruction of precious bushland in Mayana in New South Wales, has not addressed the illegal destruction of koala habitat by a coal mining company in Queensland. In the Parliament, the Prime Minister is refusing to negotiate with the Greens for environment laws that actually work. Shouldn't the summit be more accurately called the Nature Negative Summit?
Order. Order. I'm waiting to call the Minister. Minister McAllister.
That nature negative. Oh, I get it.
Order. Minister McAllister.
Well, thanks very much, President. And that was a long list of grievances which effectively come down to a set of questions around why the Labor Party and why the Labor government won't apply the law in the way that the Greens political party assert it should be applied, which is essentially on the vibe of things. We actually take a very different approach. The approach taken by Minister Plibersek, as should be taken by all responsible parties of government, is to consider the matters placed before them, consider the evidence associated with those issues and those decisions that are required, and to then apply the law. Now, that is the approach we take. It's not actually about considering the vibe of things and choosing projects that we like or people that we like or proponents we like, as you would suggest, and so frequently, shamefully, is suggested by those sitting opposite us. It's actually about applying the law. And I'll tell you what, we are working incredibly hard to restore all of the damage and all of the destruction that has been wreaked upon our environment by the people opposite over the last decade. There was a wasted decade when so much could have happened and very little did. But we are working to it. We are seeking to set up our first environmental protection agency with strong powers, a new tough cop on the beat, and we would like the Greens Party to support that. The Greens political party should support that legislation because it would be good for the environment and, incidentally, it would provide a great deal of certainty for the business community. We have doubled funding to better look after national parks, including Kakadu and Uluru, after the Liberals let them fall apart. We are protecting Jabiluka from mining. We're adding it to the Kakadu National Park. We've protected an extra 40 million hectares of Australia's beautiful land and sea, an area bigger than Germany. And there's more to come.
Order.
We've tripled the size of Macquarie Island Marine Park. We've kept the Great Barrier Reef off the World Heritage in Danger list. And that's a set of achievements.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Hanson-Young, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Could the Minister please tell me what is nature positive about approving 3 new coal mines that will create 1.4 billion tonnes of emissions out to 2060 and will destroy hundreds of hectares of koala habitat? What is nature positive about your 3 new coal mines?
Senator Pratt, order. Order. Senator Cash. Minister McAllister.
Well, thank you, President. As I explained to the senator in my answer to her primary question, the job of government is to make decisions based on the national environmental law and based on the facts. And the truth is that the decisions that the senator refers to extend 3 existing operations. These are not new
Minister,
projects.
please resume your seat. Order, particularly Senator McKim. Minister, please continue.
These are not new projects. The senator essentially asks why these projects it asks the Environment Minister to consider the emissions associated with these projects. And the truth is that they are considered, of course. They're considered under laws that were developed and voted for in this chamber by the Greens political party. So the safeguard mechanism ensures that all new industrial facilities, including new and existing coal mines, are subject to binding limits to reduce their direct emissions to net zero by 2050. That law is in place, and it's a law that you voted for, Senator.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hanson-Young, second supplementary.
Thank you. The government has broken their promise to fix Australia's environment laws. The Prime Minister has told the mining lobby he wants to weaken them even further. Contradicting his Environment Minister, the Prime Minister says one thing in WA, the Environment Minister says another thing in Sydney. Why has the Prime Minister rolled his Environment Minister?
Thank you, Senator Hanson-Young. Order across the chamber. Order. Order. Minister McAllister. Minister McCullough, resume your seat. Senator McKenzie. Seriously, your choice is to sit here in silence or leave the chamber. Minister McAllister, please continue.
Thanks very much, President. The truth is, Senator, that there are a set of laws before this chamber which you could vote for. They are a set of laws that we committed to. We did say we wished to reform
Minister
the EPBC.
McAllister, please resume your seat. Senator Hanson-Young and Senator Kim, I don't need to hear the running commentary. You are being disrespectful to the chamber. Senator Hanson-Young, you're not in a debate with me. Minister McAllister, please continue.
The government's made it very clear, and this is from the Prime Minister down, that these are laws that should be supported in their current form, Senator, because there is something in this legislation for everyone.
Order.
There's a new tough cop on the beat, the first ever national EPA with strong powers and ability to issue orders, audit and monitor businesses to make sure they're doing the right thing. And those are measures that a party that claims to seek to protect the environment should vote for. Those are things that you should vote for. But it would be important for business too, because what business say is they want certainty. And these laws offer that, and it is a very great shame that the coalition refuses to support them.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Ghosh.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Communications, Senator McAllister. Minister, the NBN is critical infrastructure which reaches over 12.4 million premises across Australia, providing fast, reliable and affordable broadband across Australia. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to secure this important public infrastructure for the future?
Order. Minister McAllister.
Well, thanks for the question, Senator Ghosh. And you are right. The NBN is absolutely critical. It currently reaches over 12.4 million premises, and it's on track to deliver connectivity to 90% of houses and businesses across Australia by the end of 2025. It's an asset that strengthens connectivity, whoever you are and wherever you are, and we know that more than ever it is essential that people have strong and reliable internet. It is not a luxury, it's an essential service. It impacts on how we work and live. It is also critical for sharing information during emergencies. Now, today, in the House of Representatives, the Albanese government has introduced amendments to the National Broadband Network Companies Act that provide certainty for industry and consumers by securing ongoing public ownership of the NBN. And these amendments demonstrate the government's ongoing commitment to delivering social, economic and employment benefits for Australians, President. It's actually vital. It's actually vital that the ongoing mission of the NBN should be guided by the public interest, not by the interests of shareholders, because it's in our national interest to have internet access that is affordable and accessible. And they reinforce that the NBN will remain in public hands for the foreseeable future. It's what we set out in the 2022 NBN Statement of Expectations. It also delivers on a commitment we made ahead of the 2022 federal election. We remember we actually remember when those opposite rushed to declare that the NBN was complete just so they could sell it off. Just so they could sell it off. And we are working to ensure that the NBN is owned.
Thank you, Minister.
By
The time for
Australian
answering has expired. Senator Watt, order. And Senator Duniam. Senator Birmingham, I've got Senator Ghosh on his feet. Senator Ghosh, first supplementary.
What other investments and improvements have been made to support the delivery of the NBN across Australian premises in the last 2 years?
Minister McAllister.
Thanks, President. Well, Labor has a proud history of investing in the NBN. It was established, of course, by a previous federal Labor government because we knew back then what we know now, that access to fast and reliable and affordable internet is a necessity. And since coming to government, we have invested $2.4 billion to expand full fibre NBN access to 1.5 million additional premises, and that includes 660,000 rural and regional communities. From September next year, millions of NBN customers will benefit from an increase in download speeds with up to 5 times the current capability, no extra wholesale cost, and we are rolling out more fibre in the fixed network, upgrading the fixed wireless network and planning for future needs. We've connected over 18,000 families to free internet until the end of 2025 through the School Student Broadband Initiative to ensure that no child experiences a digital disadvantage.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Ghosh, second supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. How is the approach by the Albanese Labor government different from the approach of previous governments? And what risk is there to this critical communications infrastructure if this bill is not passed?
Thank you, Senator Ghosh. Minister McAllister.
Well, it's a very good question, Senator Ghosh, because I've heard the opposition calling out, interjecting, why is this legislation required? Well, I can tell you why. President, it is because those opposite will never pass up an opportunity to privatise critical infrastructure. Privatisation is in their DNA, and you can look at their track record on communications infrastructure. First they sold off Telstra, and then they made an absolute mess of the NBN. For those in rural and regional Australia, communities that were already separated by distance, the Coalition set them up for an enduring disadvantage, subjecting those communities to a second-rate NBN patch-up job. Keeping the NBN in public hands will ensure that that company has the certainty that is necessary for its investment planning, for its operational decisions, the decisions that are needed to maximise the economic and the critical social benefits of the NBN.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Roberts.
Thank you, President. My question is directed to the Minister representing the Minister for Immigration and Minister representing the Attorney-General, Senator Watt. Last week, the Australian Federal Police publicised the case of a father who was convicted of attempting to force his 15-year-old and 17-year-old daughters into arranged marriages. For clarity, my question only relates to arranged marriages where either party is not given a choice. To respect the privacy of the children involved, Minister, my question goes to policy. Is human trafficking a 15-year-old girl into marriage sufficient grounds for deportation? If not, why not?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Roberts, for the question. I don't have details as to the specific case that you're referring to, but certainly what I can say is that a breach of character grounds on any basis would be the basis for cancelling someone's visa and deporting them from Australia. So if it is the case that that a crime has been committed in this case, or if character grounds in general were found to not be satisfied, then of course the outcome of that would be that a visa would be cancelled. As I say, I don't have enough details about the particular case involved, and you yourself were saying that you didn't want to go to the details of that case and wanted to talk more generally, but that is the general position when it comes to visas. If there's any further information I can provide, I'd be happy to do so.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Roberts, first supplementary.
Thank you. Minister, forced marriage of a child carries a 9-year prison penalty, 25 years if the child is sent overseas for the marriage. Australian Federal Police Commander Kate Ferry described the offence as human trafficking, as does the Attorney-General's website. Your answer downplayed a serious issue of women's rights and contradicts your own website. Minister, with 91 cases of forced marriage reported to the AFP in the year to June, when will you start deporting the offenders, including the clergy involved?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President. Thanks, Senator Roberts. Well, I mean, again, I don't have the details of those 91 cases, and I'm not certain that they all involve people who are in Australia on visas. I'd want to fact-check that before accepting that that was the case. But as I say, when it comes to visas that are granted to people to visit Australia, they come on conditions, and of course any visa holder has responsibilities to the people of Australia while they're present in Australia. Ordinarily what would occur is that if someone is convicted of an offence, and I don't know whether any of these individuals have been convicted of offences, but if that were to occur, then they would ordinarily serve their sentence in an Australian prison, and once they'd served their sentence, that would be the time at which they would be deported, that their visa would be cancelled. Ordinarily, as I understand it, we don't cancel people's visas before we put them in jail if they've committed an offence. They would serve out their sentence in a jail and then went on a release. That would be the time that their visa would be cancelled.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Roberts, second supplementary.
Minister, how many arrivals on permanent visas were deported for criminal activity in calendar 2023 or later, if you have the data? For clarity, I don't want visa overstays or deportations on technical grounds. My question goes specifically to reluctance to deport for a serious criminal offence.
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister Watt.
Thanks, Senator Roberts. Well, again, I don't have that level of detail with me representing the Attorney-General, but if there's information that I can provide to answer your question, I'd be happy to provide that. What I can say is that, obviously, it's a matter for police if there is an allegation of a crime. As I say, I'm not across the details of this particular report that you're referring to. I'm not aware of whether the person has been charged or convicted, but it's a matter for police.
Resume your seat. Senator Roberts.
Standing Order 72(3)(c) says that answers shall be directly relevant to each question. I'm not after the details on this question. I've got them. We're not. What we want to know is how many arrivals on permanent visas were deported for criminal activity in calendar 2023 or later, if you have the data.
Senator Roberts, you simply needed to have stood and said relevance. The minister was relevant. He indicated in the first part of his answer that if he could get more detail, he would, and he is entitled to continue his answer. Minister Watt, please continue.
Thank you, President. As I say, Senator Roberts, I'm happy to provide any further details in addition to anything that I do have here. What I am aware of is that there's been significantly more visa cancellations occur under this government than occurred while Mr Dutton was the Home Affairs Minister. That's something I can tell you, but I'm happy to come back to you with additional details once they come to hand.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Duniam.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. On the 25th of September in Tasmania, the Prime Minister said that his government had not exempted the Queensland Olympic infrastructure from GST calculations. Yet Treasury documents show these projects have actually been exempt from GST calculations. Minister, are the Treasury documents wrong, or did the Prime Minister mislead Tasmanians? Can you confirm to the Senate whether or not these projects for Queensland Olympics infrastructure are indeed exempt from GST calculations?
Thank you, Senator Duniam. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I thank Senator Duniam for the question. I don't have details of that before me. I do know that states regularly, all states regularly seek exemptions for a range of different projects, including the Tasmanian state government from time to time, from GST considerations, and they are dealt with through appropriate processes and decision-making. I don't have the specifics of the arrangements on the Queensland Olympic infrastructure with me, nor the comments that you say the Prime Minister said in Tasmania. I'm happy to see if there's any further information I can provide the chamber. Of course, we are the government that is looking to fund and support, co-fund.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Duniam.
President, by way of support for the Minister, I'm happy to table the documents from the Treasury website.
Resume your seat. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, forgive me for not accepting all Well, no, for the way the question has been asked and for saying that if there is any further information I can provide to the chamber, I will undertake to do so. But it is not unusual for states to seek GST exemptions for infrastructure. I would think every single state has applied to do so over the last few years, and it goes through the appropriate decision-making and accountability processes for those decisions. Of course, the way GST is distributed is a matter for the Commonwealth Grants Commission, and again, there's a range of views about how that GST is shared or allocated and how the relativities are come to, and there isn't universal agreement across the states about that either.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Duniam, first supplementary.
Well, thanks, President. The Prime Minister last week, on the 25th of September, also suggested that as Infrastructure Minister he never signed off on anything exempt from GST in Tasmania, except there is a document that he signed dated the 2nd of October when he was Minister for Infrastructure, exempting $50 million of payments to the Tasmanian government for the Macquarie Point precinct from GST calculations. Minister, can I ask, who is right, the Prime Minister at his press conference on the 25th of September or the document he claimed he didn't sign on in the year 2012?
Thank you, Senator Duniam. Minister Gallagher.
I'm wondering why—
Order.
Well,
order. The minister's on her feet. Minister, please resume your— Senators on my left and my right. Order. 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 Senator Birmingham. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President, and I thank Detective Duniam for the question. Look, look, forgive me for what—
Minister Gallagher, I do remind you, you do need to—
Sorry, Senator Duniam.
Thank you.
Senator Duniam. Thank you. I don't have— Again, I haven't seen the transcript from which he's reading. I haven't got that detail in front of me. As I said, there is universal disagreement about this matter across the Federation between states, particularly about what should be included for the relativities process and what shouldn't be. I know there has been exemptions from time to time, not for all the exemptions that have been sought across all of the states across Australia. I think, if there is further information I can provide, I'll come back.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Duniam, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Given the Prime Minister cited Queensland not getting an exemption for Tasmania being not able to get an exemption for its stadium funding and him not signing off on the Macquarie Point precinct funding for Tasmania to not get a GST exemption, now we know that both of those projects got an exemption. Will the Australian government do the right thing by Tasmanians and give us our GST back?
Order. 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 Senators on my left and right, particularly on my right, the Tasmanian senators, come to order. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, the decisions about how GST are distributed are made by the Commonwealth Grants Commission. Are made by the Commonwealth Grants Commission, where a relativity is provided through annual reviews.
Minister Gallagher, please resume your seat. Minister Wong.
If we could try and actually listen to what Senator Gallagher is saying.
Well, Minister Wong, you may have noticed I have been calling the chamber to order since we commenced question time. I don't think I've been very successful, but I will try again and ask senators to listen in respectful silence whilst the minister is answering the question. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. And so the Commonwealth Grants Commission is responsible for determining the relativities for each state. I know that each state and territory usually participates in that and argues about why they should get more share of the GST than another state through direct consultation.
Minister Gallagher. Senator Birmingham, wait till I call you and then raise the point of order. Senator Birmingham.
President, the Finance Minister is wilfully seeking to mislead the Senate in her presentation of the arguments.
Senator
here.
Birmingham,
the reality is that the government decides exemptions, not the Commonwealth Grants Commission.
Your seat. That is a debating point. Minister Gallagher.
President. And Senator Dunian asked me about GST distribution, essentially. That was his question around will Tasmania get some GST back? I'm saying the way the GST allocations are made are through the Commonwealth Grants Commission, so I completely reject Senator Birmingham's assertion there. This is done by direct submission and assessment by the Commonwealth Grants Commission. They determine and have always determined the distribution of GST.
Thank you, Minister Gallagher. Senator Thorpe.
Thank you, President. My question is for the Minister for Indigenous Australians. Minister, do you agree that children's human rights are being regularly violated in this country?
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Minister McCarthy.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Thorpe, for the question. We were able to announce last week a National Commissioner for Indigenous children in Australia. President.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Thorpe.
Relevance. It was a simple question.
Senator Thorpe, the minister has just—
Simple question.
Senator Thorpe, please resume your seat. The minister has just started her response. I will listen carefully, and if necessary, I will direct her to your question. Minister McCarthy.
Thank you, President. Last week we announced the National Commissioner for Indigenous Children because we see it as incredibly important that the high rates of the removal of First Nations children in this country is way too high. And so we certainly see that there is a real concern for First Nations children in Australia.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Thorpe, first supplementary.
It's not good enough that you can't clearly acknowledge that children's human rights are being abused. We have 10-year-olds being strip searched, Minister, in your electorate, in your state, territory. So, as Minister, are you and your government not bound by the human rights obligations this government is signed up to? And please don't ramble, just answer.
Senator Thorpe, just ask your question. Thank you. Minister McCarthy.
President, thank you. I look forward to answering the question. And given the time that I have, I think it's important to be able to alert the Senate of the significance of trying to care for our children, but all Australian children, President. It is of concern that children, in particular First Nations children, end up in custody, end up in detention, and that is why we have announced a First Nations Indigenous Children's Commissioner, because we want to see the low rates and the rates reduced across the country, but obviously not just for Indigenous children, but for all children.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Thorpe, second supplementary.
Same. Children in prison are routinely subjected to violence, abuse and neglect. 2 children who were denied basic mental health care have died by suicide in child prisons that your government and you support in the last year. Will the federal government stop facilitating the abuse of children in this country and take action, or will you just keep avoiding responsibility and blaming the states?
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Minister McCarthy.
Well, thank you, President. I certainly reject outright any assertion by the senator that we are individually responsible for what's going on. It is clearly not
Minister
good.
McCarthy, please resume your seat. Senator Thorpe.
Relevance to the question.
Senator Thorpe, the minister is being directly relevant to your question. Please resume your seat and I'll call the minister to continue her answer. Minister McCarthy.
Thank you, President. It is clearly concerning.
Senator Thorpe, I have asked you to resume your seat. Thank you. Minister, please continue.
Good leg exercises, President. It is clearly concerning, of course.
Minister McCarthy. Senator Thorpe.
Relevance. This is not a joke. There are children dying in prisons under your watch.
Thorpe, resume your seat. Order. Order. Senator Thorpe, come to order. Order. Senator McCarthy.
Thank you, President. It is clearly a serious concern. It is.
Senator Cash, come to order. Minister, please continue.
It is a concern, President, of the high rates of First Nations youth, but First Nations people in custody across the country. I certainly spent time in Western Australia visiting the Banksia Detention Centre to work and to look at what was going on with our First Nations children in that centre. I've certainly been working with trying to see that we have our Aboriginal medical centres, in detention centres across the country. It is a process that Minister Mark Butler and I are working on.
Minister, the time for answering has expired. Senator Sheldon.
My question is to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations, Senator Watt. I note the Albanese Labor government's workplace relations agenda is specifically designed to help Australians deal with cost of living pressures and get wages moving. Because of this agenda, real wages are finally growing after 10 years of deliberate stagnation by those opposite under Mr Dutton and the Liberals and Nationals. Minister, how is the Albanese Labor government supporting wages growth, and how do these policies help ease cost of living pressures on Australian workers?
Thank you, Senator Sheldon. Order. Senator Cash, I've called you to order a number of times this question time. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Sheldon. Well, isn't it interesting that if there's one thing that will set off the opposition, it's the idea that workers get paid fair wages. The horror that workers would get paid fair wages. You can be guaranteed they'll go off about that because they always want to drive wages down. Now, we know on this side of the chamber that people in Australia are doing it tough right now. And cost of living is front and centre of people's minds, and it's the top of our government's priorities as well. And that's why we've delivered tax cuts, fairer tax cuts, opposed by the opposition. Energy bill relief, opposed by the opposition. More bulk billing, opposed by the opposition. Cheaper childcare, opposed by the opposition. Cheaper medicines, opposed by the opposition. Rent assistance, opposed by the opposition. And HECS relief for students and graduates. We're yet to have the vote, but I reckon that'll probably be opposed by the opposition as well. And that's because every bit of relief matters to Australians. And unlike the opposition, the Albanese Labor government also sees strong wages growth as a key part of the cost of living solution, not the problem. When we came to government, annual real wages were falling by 3.4%. Wages were falling compared to inflation dramatically. So it's no wonder that Australians were feeling cost of living pressures. And it wasn't an accident that we saw that under the coalition, because of course we know that they openly said that low wages was a deliberate design feature of their economic policy. Now that they're in opposition, Mr Dutton and the coalition have continued that approach, voting against almost every single measure to get wages moving, and now they're threatening to take it all away. And after a decade of attacking workers and deliberate wage suppression under the Liberals and Nationals, real wages are growing again at the same time as we're driving down inflation and keeping industrial action low. Labor's changes are working as we intended. In the last fortnight alone, we saw average private sector pay rises in new enterprise agreements hit 4% for the first time in 12 years, with the highest number of workers covered by—
Senator Sheldon, first supplementary.
Now, I note that Mr Dutton and the Liberals and Nationals have opposed these wage rises every step of the way. How are the Albanese government's reforms helping Australians with the cost of living? And why is it so important that Australian households earn more and keep more of what they earn?
Thank you, Senator Sheldon. Minister Watt.
Thanks, Senator Sheldon. It is important at a time of cost of living pressures that Australians are earning more and keeping more of what they earn, and that is what's happening under the Albanese Labor government. As I said, in the last fortnight we saw average private sector pay rises in new enterprise agreements hit 4% per annum for the first time in 12 years. Ooh, how long was the coalition in power? 10 years. So the first time in 12 years. That must have been the last time Labor was in power that we saw private sector pay rises hit 4% per annum. We've also seen the gender pay gap fall to historic lows under the Albanese Labor government, and annual real wages have been growing now for 3 consecutive quarters. Now, that wasn't what we saw from Mr Dutton and Senator Cash, who told us that we would be entering the dark ages and close down the Australian economy if we passed our IR laws. In fact, what's happening is that wages are increasing, industrial action is falling, more jobs are being created than ever before, and Australians are moving forward.
Minister Watt. Senator Cash, may I invite you to make your contribution at Take Note, not during question time. Senator Sheldon, first supplementary.
Well, given Mr Dutton and the Liberals and Nationals have committed to making targeted repeals of our workplace relations changes, and Senator Hume has claimed that adding more rights for workers is unreasonable, what are the key barriers to creating jobs and getting wages moving, and why is the Albanese Labor government so committed to delivering well-paid, secure jobs for Australian workers?
And my apologies, Senator Sheldon. That was the second supplementary, and I call the minister.
Thanks, Senator Sheldon. Well, the Albanese Labor government wants to see Australians earn more and keep more of what they earn, whereas Mr Dutton and the coalition want Australians to work longer for less. Now, we know that's the case because that is their record every time they've been in government, when they had an anti-worker and anti-union agenda, and now they're in opposition. They're committed to ripping away rights for casual workers and forcing workers to do unpaid overtime by removing the right to disconnect. We saw Senator Hume recently confirm that they are going to take a sledgehammer to wages and conditions and review multi-employer bargaining. And as Senator Sheldon said, Senator Hume on TV, it's there for you to have a look at, described more rights for workers as unreasonable. What a terrible thing for workers to have rights. That would be a disgraceful thing. It would be unreasonable. Well, that's what we saw from Senator Hume. It would be unreasonable for workers to have more rights. Well, what it means for early education workers is $155 more per week under Labor than what they were getting under the coalition, and that's what will happen to more workers if the coalition were ever elected.
Senator Rennick.
My question is to the Minister representing the Minister
Senator
for
Rennick,
Industry
I'm
and
sorry,
Science.
please resume your seat. Senator Hume. Senator Rennick, I invite you to begin your question again and we'll reset the clock. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Industry and Science, Senator Farrell. In an answer to a question on notice asking for the model used to prove that reducing CO2 emissions to net zero by 2050 will actually achieve a 1.5-degree reduction in global temperatures, the CSO replied that there are over 40 global climate models used around the world. Why should the Australian taxpayer stump up billions of dollars in subsidies for renewable energy when the scientific experts can't even agree on the method used to calculate CO2 emissions and its impact on the temperature?
Thank you, Senator Rennick. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Rennick for his question. And it's pleasing to see somebody in this place has got an interest in science and industry, that's a very pleasing development. Look, I don't know the specifics of your question off the top of my head. Of course, this is not my policy area. We have a very fine minister in. Senator Mr. Husek, Minister Husek, who looks after this area. I will get an answer to your question from him as soon as I can. But can I say this, that I don't think the science is in dispute about the need to move to net zero, Senator Rennick. And Australia is unique.
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Rennick.
Point of order, Chair. The question is about how it's being measured, not whether or not it's in dispute, but how it's being measured and the accuracy and quality assurance of those measurements.
There was an introduction to your question, which I think the minister is being relevant to the question, and I will continue to listen carefully. Thank you, Senator Rennick. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank you for that support on my answer. Look, I've said to you quite honestly, Senator Rennick, I don't have the specific details to answer that question, but I will get them for you. But I'm making the general point that the need to move to net zero is not in dispute. This country is uniquely placed not only to move to net zero for our own economy, but to assist the rest of the world. One of the areas that I'm very directly involved in is the issue of critical minerals, and Australia is very, very fortunate in that we have an overabundance of those critical minerals that we're going to need to move to net zero.
Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Rennick, first supplementary.
The Black Summer bushfires triggered a massive phytoplankton bloom the size of Australia in the Southern Ocean. Phytoplankton is the biggest carbon sink on the planet and, according to the CSIRO, absorbs 30% of human CO2 emissions. Yet, when asked in estimates if phytoplankton is used as a CO2 offset when calculating net zero, the CSIRO said it wasn't. Why isn't phytoplankton being used as a CO2 offset when calculating net zero?
Thank you, Senator Rennick. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Rennick for his first supplementary question. I wasn't present during those questions, I don't believe, but I shall make contact with the CSIRO and seek to get an answer to your question as quickly as I can, Senator Rennick.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Rennick, second supplementary.
In relation to a 1.5-degree reduction in temperature, 2 executives at the Bureau of Meteorology were recently castigated for giving evidence to a federal court judge that was false and unreliable in a deliberate attempt to mislead the court. The case comes after it was revealed the Bureau was no longer meeting its obligations in upper air monitoring. Given this behaviour, why should the public trust anything the Bureau says about weather records?
Senator Rennick, your second sup should really relate to your primary question in your second supplementary. It is hard to I'm ruling on this, so I don't need input. It is hard to see that, but I would invite the minister to respond to your question as he sees fit. Thank you, Senator Rennick.
President, and thank Senator Rennick for his second supplementary question. Again, I'm not familiar with those issues that you raised or the proceedings that you referred to. Again, I will get a detailed response for you and provide that to you, Senator Rennick, as quickly as I can.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Stewart.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister for Indigenous Australians, Senator McCarthy. I'm sure that everyone in this chamber can agree that the rates of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children and young people in out-of-home care is clearly unacceptable. First Nations children are 11 times more likely to be in out-of-home care compared to non-Indigenous children. Can the minister outline what steps are being taken to reverse these statistics for our children?
Thank you, Senator Stewart. Minister McCarthy.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Stewart for your question. The Albanese Labor government is committed to achieving better outcomes for First Nations children, young people and their families. We committed to a National Commission for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children and young people, and we are delivering on that commitment. The over-representation of First Nations children in out-of-home care continues to trend upwards. Closing the Gap Target 12, which aims to reduce the over-representation of First Nations children in out-of-home care by 45% by 2031, is not on track. The Productivity Commission found that nationally, as at 30th of June 2023, the rate of First Nations children aged 0 to 17 years in out-of-home care was worsening. The National Commissioner will be dedicated to protecting and promoting the rights, interests and well-being of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children and young people across a range of issues, including the over-representation of Indigenous children in out-of-home care.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Stewart, first supplementary.
Thank you, President, and I thank the Minister for outlining the government's commitments to improving outcomes for First Nations children. Can the Minister tell us more about the Independent National Commission for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children and young people, and how the National Commissioner will better support outcomes for First Nations children?
Thank you, Senator Stewart. Minister McCarthy, second supplementary. First supplementary, sorry.
Thank you, President. While many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children and young people are doing well, the outcomes for some have just not improved. And this role represents a key step forward in the government's commitment to listen to and meaningfully engage with First Nations people, and this is how to promote systemic change. The new National Commissioner will complement and not duplicate the roles of the National Children's Commissioner. The new National Commissioner will provide expert advice on the development and delivery of policies, programs and services to ensure they meet the unique needs of First Nations children and young people, drawing on their work and consultation with community. The National Commissioner for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children and young people will have a specific focus on protecting and promoting the rights, interests and well-being of First Nations children and young people across Australia.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Stewart, second supplementary.
I thank the Minister. It is great to hear about the plans for the National Commissioner. How have organisations and peaks in the sector, who are the experts here, responded to the government's initiative to establish an independent National Commission for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children and young people?
Thank you, Senator Stewart. Minister McCarthy.
Thank you, President. Well, the role responds to long-standing calls from First Nations stakeholders for stronger accountability for the outcomes experienced by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children and young people, including as recently indicated in the Productivity Commission's review of the National Agreement on Closing the Gap. Safe and supported Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leadership group members, along with other First Nations reps, have specifically called for a National Commissioner, in particular Snake. The National Voice for Our Children have called the announcement a game-changer. CEO Catherine Liddle said the National Commissioner will be the champion, the voice and facilitator for our children, young people and families, and who will hold governments to account. Catherine Liddle goes on to say they will help turn the tide. President, I want to thank Snake for working with the government on the development of this commission and look forward to continuing our productive relationships.
Thank you, Minister. Minister Wong.
Thank you. Thank you.
Gets Senator Cash.
Thank you.
Minister
I ask
gets
I've asked that further questions be placed on notice.
Senator Cash, the minister was on her feet and the minister gets precedence. You know that very well. Order! 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 Order. Just a moment, Senator Cash. I'll let the deputy take the chair and then I'll come to you, or he will come to you.
Senator Shoebridge, you seeking the call?
Deputy President.
Yeah.
Yes. Pursuant to Standing Order 74.5, I ask the Minister representing the Minister for Home Affairs for an explanation as to why an answer has not been provided to questions on notice numbered 57, 62, 66, 705, 706, 709, 710, 1010, 1011 and 1012, asked during the 2024-25 budget estimates hearings of the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Legislation Committee. And, Deputy President, the questions relate to the legacy caseload and fast-track systems.
Minister.
President, the answer, in essence, comes down to the sheer volume of questions on notice that are being asked in the Home Affairs portfolio. At the last round of Senate estimates hearings, more than 1,000 questions on notice were asked in the Home Affairs portfolio, 276 from Senator Hume, 264 from Senator Shoebridge, 170 from Senator Patterson and hundreds more from other senators. Of those questions, just under two-thirds have already been answered, 672 have been answered, 376 are unanswered. The reason some of these questions remain unanswered is because of the unprecedented explosion in the number of questions on notice so far this term. We've seen repeated questioning from those opposite, for example, about what paper departments are using or what temperature thermostats are set to, asking the big issues. By comparison, and as I say, more than 1,000 questions on notice were asked in the most recent Home Affairs estimates. By comparison, the numbers of questions on notice in the Home Affairs portfolio in the last term of parliament were 563 in 21-22, 468 in 2020-21, 109 in 2019-20. So there's been essentially a doubling of the number of questions on notice asked in that one portfolio alone. But I'm aware that both ministers, ministers' offices and departments are actively working on remaining the answering questions.
Senator Shoebridge.
Thanks, Deputy President. I move the Senate take note of that. I think it's described as an explanation in the notes I have here. There are a number of matters to say immediately to that. it is the job of the government, under the standing orders, to respond to the questions that have been asked. Each and every one of these questions relates to serious issues involving the human rights of some 7,000 people living in our community. And to respond to them as the minister just did in that manner, to equate them to questions about paper supplies or thermostats, shows the utter disrespect this minister and the government has for the thousands of people who are having their rights abused because they've been denied under the grossly unfair fast-track system. It shows to equate the lives and the struggles, the unfair struggles of people under the fast-track system with issues about the temperature setting of thermostats shows the disrespect that this government has for people who are having their rights repeatedly abused by the broken immigration system that they are in charge of. These questions that have failed to be answered related to questions such as the staffing allocation to the Immigration Assessment Authority. That's an authority that this parliament has passed legislation to abolish, and we want to know, is it still operating? How many people are employed there in a system that everybody agrees is grossly unfair and we have collectively decided should be abolished? We wanted information about the number of people who have lodged applications for ministerial intervention. How many people have been refused a TPV or a SHEV? Wanted basic questions that should be readily available to the minister at the touch of a button about how many claims have been approved or granted or refused this year from this caseload on information provided by Home Affairs. We wanted to know the information on the 375 children that have had their claims rejected by the unfair fast-track system. This is all critical information about a core human rights issue, and it's information I would suggest this government doesn't want to provide because it would show what an appalling state of affairs they are presiding over. Some 2.5 years into this government that promised to do things different to the previous government, and what they have done is continue to subject some 7,000 people who were failed by the coalition's appalling fast-track process in a system that every independent review says is unfair, biased and cruel. And this government has not only not helped them, but is now refusing to even answer basic questions about what's happening to those people. And the Albanese government is preventing these people from rebuilding their lives, from stepping forward, and it's this waste of human potential that is just so criminal. I was lucky to meet with 3 people yesterday, 3 bright, capable, engaging young people who have been subject to this fast-track system. And I know they would have met with any other member in this chamber, because the offer was open to all of you to talk to these people and their advocates and find out what's been happening in their lives. And this isn't the first time I've met with these 3 extraordinary young people. I've met with them previously, and them and many others in the cohort. And one of the people I met with was Elnaz, a brilliant woman with a PhD in cancer research. Truly extraordinary. I would like to go into detail about her cancer research work, about the studies that she's doing of genetics and how that can be particularly used to treat skin cancer and melanomas. But frankly, I don't understand it. She is an extraordinarily talented PhD, and her work is internationally renowned. She has repeated requests to speak to her research which has been government-funded, I might add, and which continues in a government-funded agency to provide world-breaking research, cancer research on melanomas. She's repeatedly asked to make international presentations on her work, and she can't go because if she leaves the country, she won't be allowed back in. She'll be refused a return if she leaves the country. And so she can't share her research knowledge with other cancer researchers around the world. She can't even go to New Zealand, and some of the work she's doing is a co-production with New Zealand research authorities. She can't travel to New Zealand. Why? Because this government refuses to give her any kind of permanent visa. Has her on endless cycling bridging visas with this constant threat that the next visa won't be granted, or her work rights will be removed, or her right to Medicare will be taken off. Every time on this 6 monthly cycle that she lives in on bridging visas, she's waiting to see if this time some unnamed bureaucrat in Home Affairs will take away her work rights, take away her any ongoing study rights. And why are we doing that to Elnaz? Why are we doing that to Elnaz, this extraordinarily talented young woman who's contributing so much? And I've got to be frank with you, as someone whose skin burns when I work out on a 20-degree day which is overcast, I want Elnaz's work to complete on melanoma and skin cancer research. I'll be frank, I have a personal interest in it. Yes, as do many of my colleagues. Why is the government doing this? Why is Elnaz still, like a decade on, unable to build a permanent life here? Why has she refused the right to travel? Why can't she go and teach her research, give her research insights to other cancer researchers around the world? Because this government refuses to help. They refuse to deal with any of the 7,000 legacy caseload systems. And not only that, Elnaz is here because she's an Hazara, who we know are currently being persecuted in Afghanistan for the simple fact of being Hazara. And imagine this. She's not just Hazara, she's an incredibly educated, articulate, capable Hazara woman. And does this government seriously say she has no refugee claim, that she can go back to Afghanistan and return to the Taliban? Elnaz? It's obscene on so many levels. Why won't the minister put in place a process that can see Elnaz get security? And the system is so arbitrary that when it comes to Elnaz, she and a number of her family members came here fleeing the persecution of the Taliban some 10 years ago. Other members of her family, close members of her family, had the refugee claims accepted. And almost with exactly the same family history, Elnaz was just randomly rejected. Almost exactly the same facts. And when you speak to Elnaz about what happened in the fast-track process, she will tell you that she put her application in after months of pulling together the documentation, this thick application that went in, supported by detailed accounts, supported by contemporaneous records, telling the story of her persecution as a Hazara woman. She put it in at 10 o'clock one night, and she got the notice of rejection at 10 a.m. the following day by the fast-track process. That was so obscenely disrespectful, so obviously unfair, so obviously a refusal to engage with the merits of her claim, or even pretend to. And 10 years on now, she's still saying, why is the government doing this to her and so many like her? And that's the question we haven't had answered from the minister today. And that's the question Labor refuses to answer. And that base unfairness is why Labor's refusing to answer any of these 10 questions about fast track, because they know what they're doing is so bloody wrong. I could speak more about the unfairness in Elnaz's story, but I also met with Soroya, and a young woman of Sri Lankan heritage, came here as a child and again refused by the fast-track system, like pretty much everybody who came here with a Tamil background, Sri Lankan Tamil background. There's like a 93% refusal under fast-track for any Tamil refugee claim. It was almost like computer says no when anyone with Tamil background puts in an application. Just computer says no, you will be rejected. And Soroya finished her HSC very recently in Sydney, did incredibly well, proud parents. enrolled in a short course at university because she had a bridging visa that for that moment gave her study rights, paid some $17,000 for the short course to get started because the government refuses to give her and anyone like her, other young people who have spent the great majority of their life here going to schools next to our kids, refuses to give them any access to HECS or any subsidised access to university. So she paid $17,000 of her own money for the short course at university in Sydney. She just starts it, she's halfway through the 3-month course, and then her bridging visa rolls over and they took away her study rights. And she had to be withdrawn from the course, and she didn't get her money back. I think she got half of her money back for the course that she'd paid. Young woman, refugee background, minimal financial resources, looking so forward to going to university, engaging on the next stage of her life. And not only does the government take away her study rights, they do it in the middle of a short course that she's paid for, and she's $7,500, $8,000 in the hole. Why? Why are you doing that to Saria? Why won't you let this incredibly bright young woman live to her full potential, go to university? Why even if you won't permit or agree to extend HECS, why take away her study rights halfway through a course so she has to pull out of university? This bright young 18-year-old woman, why do that level of cruelty to her? I can't understand it. And is it any wonder we don't get any answers from the government? Is it any wonder the ministers gone? They've all headed out. They don't have an answer to this, other than they want to be crueler than the coalition, like we heard in question time here. Proudly, we had the minister say that, oh, you've rejected more visas under Labor than the coalition used to do, that they're actually nastier and harder on immigration. And the result of that exchange of rhetoric between nasty and nastier in this chamber is that people like Saria have their lives turned upside down, have their study rights taken, have their futures stolen, and live in this endless fog of uncertainty where they have no permanency, no rights to go to university, no rights to settle down and live to their human potential. And finally, I met with Milad, who fled Iran a decade ago. He was a human rights advocate there. He's a human rights advocate here. I've been with him, as I reckon have other members in this chamber and other members of the government and the opposition, at those Women Life Freedom rallies. And I've seen him proudly speak about human rights and support those women who are standing up to the regime and speak about human rights publicly and proudly. And because of that, he's targeted by the Iranian regime. He's targeted. He has a target on him. And if he ever returned to Iran, he would be arrested, potentially tortured and put through the most grossly unjust system. We all know that. Anyone with a fair mind would know that from Home Affairs. But what does the government do in relation to Milad? Not only was he also rejected by that unfair fast-track system, he's put on these endless bridging visas. One day he has study rights, one day he has work rights, the next day he doesn't, can't get a mortgage, can't get a permanent home, can't get a permanent job. That's his life. But now they say also that he should be returned to Iran, that they don't accept his refugee claim, that Milad, who's a human rights advocate who's been standing there with other members of parliament proudly challenging this government, this brutal, murderous government, this government, the Albanese Labor government, says he should be able to be returned to Iran. What would happen if Milad got off the plane in Iran? He'd be arrested, he'd potentially be tortured, heaven knows what would happen to his family. How do you let this happen? There's some 7,000 people in this situation. And what does Minister Burke say in relation to this? He says, I've met with some people, and when I meet with them one-on-one or I get a ministerial intervention, an individual one-off ministerial intervention, then I may approve it. Well, what we know in terms of is ministerial intervention an answer to this, one-by-one bespoke justice applications to the minister, that will inevitably fail. Between 2021 and March 2024, there were only some 1,100 people who were allowed to make a ministerial intervention, and of those, only about 400 requests a year get dealt with. 400 requests a year get dealt with. So if the 7,000 backlog, the caseload legacy of fast track, is going to be dealt with by ministerial intervention at 400 cases a year, which is the government's apparent plan, it's why we wanted data. It'll be 2 decades before that's ended. and Elnaz and Saria and Malad and thousands like them deserve so much better.
Are there any other contributions to this debate? Otherwise, I'll put the question. Put the question. Those for the question say aye. Against, no. The ayes have it.